Welcome back to, there we go. Welcome back to the Warrior Servant Leader podcast. We're so glad you joined us today and you are here to hear our inspiring conversation with today's guest. Mark Mustian is an author, attorney, and former elected official, and the founder of the World of South Festival of Word of South Festival of Literature. I'm screwing this up. What's it called?
It's word of South, sort of. It's a play on word of mouth. So that's the easiest way to refer to it.
There we go. Word of South Festival of Literature and Music in Tallahassee, Florida. Book-wise, his prior novel, The Gendarme, won the Florida Gold Book Award for fiction and was shortlisted for the Saroyan International Award for writing. It's been published in 10 languages. His latest novel, Boy with Wings, which we're going to kind of dive in today, is about a boy, with wings, who ends up in a freak show traveling the South in the 1930s. It deals with issues of race and religion, but more than anything, it deals with what it means to be different. And today, we're going to do a deep dive into how ignorance, superstition, and spirituality in the novel play out, as well as in today's real fast-paced, chaotic world. So buckle up. It's going to be fun. Mark, welcome to the Warrior Servant Leader podcast.
Well, thanks, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Now, I know you live in Florida, and you're a lawyer, and for some ungodly reason, this is the Ohio State Big Ten Buckeye fan in me. You actually have a second home in Michigan?
Yes, I do.
Oh, man. Well, maybe
my wife's family was from the Upper Peninsula, so we inherited my mother-in-law's house, and so it's a nicer place to be than Florida in the summer.
There you go. Okay, good. I man, because if I was going to have to maybe shut this interview down if you were
Right.
a Michigan football fan, that would be, I could probably be expelled from the state of Ohio. But Upper Peninsula, we Buckeye fans, we can live with that. So I'm fascinated to learn and for our listeners that don't know who Paul Harvey was, but Paul Harvey had his own syndicated show and newspaper column called The Rest of the Story. And he'd share a story, and then he'd tell you the story behind the story. So I'm interested in the Paul Harvey. What is the story behind being a finance major and degree in college to law school to still practicing attorney, but you're this great author, published in 10 different languages. What is the story behind getting into that kind of fiction arena, which is very, very difficult to write?
Well, it's probably the product of an early midlife crisis, Pat. So I had been I've been a lawyer for 10 years, and most of our clients are scattered around Florida. So I spent a lot of time on I-10 and I-75 by myself. And I remember thinking, after 10 years, I said, there's got to be more than this. And so I decided, well, I'm going to maybe try and do some other things besides practicing law. And so I hit on this, said, well, hey, I'd like to try and teach, and I'd like to maybe run for public office, and I'd like to try and write a book. And so eventually I did all of those. And I taught for a couple of years at the community college in Tallahassee, and that was enough to cure me of wanting to do that. And then in a fit of insanity, I ran for public office and was elected. And I served 10 years as a city commissioner in Tallahassee. And I was glad I did it, and I'm glad it's over. And then way back when, I decided, I can just, sit down and write a novel, and somebody will want it or read it. And so I did, and I was very lucky, and I got that book published. But I later saw somebody, sort of say, well, that's the equivalent of waking up one morning and saying, I think I'll go practice thoracic surgery today. So I've been very fortunate. It's prolonged my legal career. I had, and I give credit to my law partners who would put up with me for doing this stuff. I just found it was a creative outlet that I didn't know I needed or wanted. But I've always read a lot, and so I've just when I first started writing, and my kids were really small, and so the only time I could do it was very first thing in the morning because I'd get up early, write for about an hour or whatever I could, and then it's just chaos the rest of the day. And so, but I've kept that up. I discovered I like doing it. I do it still every day. I wrote this morning, and it's just a little time to myself when I can kind of, my mind can go in different places, and so I've just discovered I like doing it.
Wow. So I got like a gazillion questions running through my mind. Being a lawyer myself and having litigated, jury trials and other trial work, how does being a writer of fiction, how has that impacted your legal career as far as I don't want to say creative writing, but to articulate on behalf of your clients? Is there a correlation that you could kind of say, aha moment? I had no idea that spending this time writing made me a better litigator or better advocate for my clients.
Well, it's all the opposite of that, probably. So
Really?
my law practice is I do municipal bond work. So I draw up the contracts for cities and counties and school districts that are borrowing money, and so I which is fine. It's been a great career, but what I found is more the sort of the impacts of being a lawyer has had on writing for fiction.
Okay.
And so there's good and bad. So the positive aspect of it is, as you know, I mean, as a lawyer, I mean, we're trained to look at both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has a story. Everybody has a right to be represented. And so you sort of, learn from law school and before said, hey, let's understand why this person did this, what their rationale is, that sort of thing. So it's very helpful, I think, as a writer and just having that background. On the other side, so when the Gendarme was published, I had this publisher, and we went through like 4 rounds of major edits on this novel. And she finally says, Mark, there's something been bugging me about this, and I finally figured it out. She says, I've experienced this with other lawyers that are writers. She said, you use too many semicolons. And I said, well, that's just the way I write.
Yeah.
And she said, no, get rid of them. And so this back and the number of semicolons in the first chapter and telling her I'm in the lowest quartile now. But it's it's in terms of practicing law, if I get in the courtroom like once a year and the judge has to help me through it because I have no idea what I'm doing, in terms of procedure or anything else. And so
Yeah.
it's just I just practice a whole different type of law. I mean, in terms of representing my clients, I mean, there is some advocacy, but it's more along the lines of just being able to, I guess this is, a factor in writing also, hone the argument down. What are we, what is the point here?
Yeah.
What are we trying, what am I trying to get you to understand? So I guess in that respect, it has been helpful.
Wow. And this is coming out of left field. So my wife owns her own accounting company, and we've been married 46, coming up on 46 years next month. And so she is a numbers person, has that degree in accounting and has clients, all over the place, and is a very, I don't know what the word is, not myopic, but numbers are numbers kind of
Right.
deal. And I'm fascinated when I meet somebody who, like you, a finance person, and in your practice, writing contracts and numbers and all that kind of stuff. Where do you get your creative streak to write 2 fiction novels that have nothing to do with finance? It would be one thing if you were writing, about a major bank fraud scheme, kind of thing. But you pick a 1930s era freak show in the South. What is that creative drive that you have to pick that kind of topic in that era?
I guess maybe it's just curiosity. So when the Gendarme is about the Armenian genocide, and my heritage way back was, we were always told was Armenian, which I had no idea anything about it really. If your name ends in IAN, generally that's it's an Armenian name, that's sort of a patronym, a son of whatever.
Yeah.
And so I just always been asked about this, always been told this. I never knew anything about it. So I somebody had asked me at a party one night, said, "Oh, you're Armenian." I said, "Same thing. I don't know. I think so." So he had said, "Well, have you ever read this book, The Black Dog of Fate?" I'm like, "No." So I picked it up and read it. And it was all about this guy, Peter Balakian's, his heritage. His grandparents were, sort of survivors of the Armenian genocide. And so I decided, well, maybe I'd like to just learn a little bit more about this, and I'll maybe try and write something, and, it may work out, may not. And that started about a 7-year endeavor of, trying to pull this together. And so it's just, so things, just, I don't know, maybe I'm obsessive at some degree, because if you get into that and you want to know more, well, what really happened? Well, and so with Boy with Wings, I trace this back to when I was a kid. Every year, the North Florida Fair would come to Tallahassee, and we would go, truck out there and get on the rides and play the games and all that. And there would be a couple of little sideshow things, with this garishly painted, yellow signs, see the world's smallest horse, or see the wild man from Borneo, chase you around. And so I've just always sort of been interested in that, and I hit on this idea to write about it. And so I did a lot of research into sideshows and freak shows and that sort of thing. And I had wanted to, and this may be a way longer response to your question than you want, Pat. Feel free to cut me off at any point. But I had wanted to interview a current sideshow performer, because, a lot of the circuses and sideshows and that sort of thing, they all wintered in Florida. And so there are communities that grew up in, down around Bradenton and Tampa, where they're, retired sideshow people, circus people. The Ringling Museum is down there in Sarasota. And there was even a little town came to be known as Gibtown, that was where these circus freaks, they just retired and lived there. The giant ran the diner kind of thing. And but in this day and age, there aren't that many sideshows. It's hard, it's sort of frowned upon to just display human oddities to look at. Mm-hmm. But of all things, I see one day that there's a sideshow coming to Tallahassee. And I'm like, oh my God, look at this. So I pay for the VIP experience where I get to meet the performers and all this. And, and then I got a notice, the sideshow's canceled. I'm like, oh God. And so, a couple months later, I see it's coming back to town. So same thing. I get to buy the VIP experience, and I go down there to the venue. And the guy goes, "Oh, you're not here for that sideshow, are you?" "Yeah, they canceled." But I managed to get the name of the this sort of operation and this one particular performer who's sort of the headliner, and I eventually made contact with him. And his stage name is Short E Dangerously. And if you Google him, he's a half man. His body ends below his rib cage, and he gets around on his hands or on a skateboard. Mm-hmm. And we eventually made contact. And by this point, I'd written the book. And I said, well, hey, would you, Shorty, be willing to appear with me in some book events? And he said, okay. And I told him, I just want to interview you about what your life is like. When you walk in the room, everybody in the room is turning and looking at you because you look different than everybody else does. And so we did it. He said the funny thing, he says, he goes, well, would you like me to perform? Because apparently in sideshows now, even the freaks have to perform in some way. And so if you go to his website, it's a picture of him with a mask breathing fire. And I was like, well, yeah, Shorty, we're in bookstores. There's no breathing fire. And so he said, well, I can perform. I said, well, what do you do? He said, well, he goes, I can do push-ups. And he goes, if that gets the crowd going, I'll do a handstand. And if I really want to blow the roof off, I'll do a one-armed handstand. I'm like, oh my God. And so then he says, you know, the game with the cups where you put a ball under the cup and you have to guess which one it is. He says, well, I do a version of that, but I put a spike in one of the cups and I slam my hand down on every cup that doesn't have the spike in it. And he said, if you Google magic tricks gone wrong, this is the first thing that comes up. And so we ended up doing that in Miami. And my daughter moved the cups around, and Shorty did not injure himself. But it was really. I'm so glad that I got to meet him, and it's just a very short. He was from Michigan, kind of a blue collar guy. He said, "I'm not an inspiration. I'm just a survivor." And he said that he had toured the world, you know, with sideshows and Ripley's Believe It or Not and all this stuff. He said, "Oh, there's statues of me around the world," but he got really sick and said, "You know, I just can't keep that life up anymore." And so for the last 10 years, he's been a DJ at a strip club in Daytona. And so my wife and I had dinner with him in Miami, and we, you know, we had a nice conversation. And he said, you know, at the end, he goes, well, could we stay and talk a little longer? He said, this is the most normal conversation I've had in a long time.
Wow.
But anyway, so it was very, you know, and one last thing about Shorty, he paid me one of the highest compliments as a writer. And if you write historical fiction that you can get, because, you know, it's important to me that the history be right. You know, I don't want somebody to pick up the book and go, well, any idiot knows this isn't right. And so he asked me, he said, well, how did you do your research on the sideshows? Because he said, you nailed it as to what that's like. And that's a hard life. I mean, just in general, and just, you know, what all goes into that and how much work there is to set up, you know, put it all back up again, go somewhere else. If it rains, it washes out everything. I mean, it's just a tough, you know, life. And I told him, said, well, I had, you know, watched these documentaries. I'd read these books, you know, novels. You know, I said that I read this one memoir called Ward Hall, King of the Sideshow. And Shorty says, I knew it. He says, I was in Ward Shaw's show for 2 years. But anyway, so it was a, you know, you know, that was you know, sort of a rewarding thing to be able to meet him, interview him, and ask him the question, what is it like? You walk into Walmart, and he goes, well, depends on what kind of day I'm having. He goes, if it's a bad day and people say, well, it's so good to see you. He's like, well, why is it good to see me? You know, why are you singling me out? And so anyway, that was just, you know, it was I was very glad I got a chance to meet him and talk to him.
And what a incredible, I'm picturing this guy as you're talking, because, and for the life of me, I suck at names. There's a guy from Australia, now lives in the United States, and I met him in Florida. I was training under John Maxwell and Les Brown and some other featured speakers that are on the circuit were, you know, talking with us about being speakers and coaches and mentors. And for the life of me, I can't think of this guy's name, but he was born with no arms and no legs. Mm-hmm. And I've seen videos of him surfboarding, doing all sorts of stuff. An incredible, gifted speaker. And so as you're talking about Shorty, I'm picturing this other gentleman. For the life of me, I can't remember his name. Which kind of leads me in then to doing this research and writing this book, and then having that opportunity to spend time with Shorty. How has that informed your worldview with respect to people that physically, immediately you can go, oh, okay, they're different. Whereas most, because I teach interacting with the folks with disabilities, 85% of all disabilities are hidden. Right. You don't see them. And so how has this experience of the book and all that you just shared, how has that impacted your worldview?
Well, it's probably just amplified it some. So as you described in the beginning, the book is, it's about race and religion, but it's a lot, it's a lot about what it means to be different. And people have asked me, and it's a legitimate question, said, "All right, well, Mark, let me get this straight, okay? So here you are, a white man born in this age, in this country, to parents who loved you and paid for your education. What do you know about being different?" And my response is, well, I tried to touch the place that everybody knows at some level of being on the outside looking in. And for me, it was probably middle school. I didn't have older brothers or sisters. My mother bought my clothes. I was a nerd. I had no idea. And I just remember still, and it's amazing how this things stick with you, and it's so ridiculous. Being ridiculed. Kids making fun of me, and so that's just it's that level of hey, just sort of awareness of like everybody's the same at some level, and then some people are dealing with a lot other stuff than others are. So I try and again, after meeting Shorty, you're right. Most people, you don't know what they're going through. Shorty, you can see it, right? See it when he comes in the room.
Yeah, and a lot of people we'll talk about compassion and empathy and talk about living examples, or at least in my lifetime, now saint, literally a saint in the Catholic Church, but Mother Teresa of Calcutta,
Right.
and you just like you marvel at how can somebody spend their whole life like a Mother Teresa in that utter squalor and third world environment, and you say to yourself, "Well, I could never do that." And until your worldview gets impacted, where you're confronted with, well, that you now got to make a choice. I mean,
Right.
like you could watch all the documentaries, read all the books, all that kind of stuff, but I'm guessing. Was there any real aha moments, or that you learned something about yourself or others because you actually got to meet and spend time, not just meet and greet,
Right.
but to spend hours and have a meal and for Shorty, I mean, when you said that, he goes, "Hey, do we have to leave? Because this is the most
Right.
normal conversation I've had in years." Man, that just like I I like feel bad. It's like
Yeah.
how sad a life that would be, that you can't have normal conversations because people's judgment of you is, and you're a freak, and that is not a compliment in most arenas.
Yeah, but
So
I think for him, I mean, the other thing that's sort of, amazing thing, and to his credit, there's a pride thing there. So for instance, so on that, so he lives in Daytona. I'm coming from Tallahassee. I'm flying down to Miami. He's going to drive. And he said, "Well, I don't know about my car. I'll make it there." So I said, "I'll pay for a rental car for you." He said, Do you have to have a special one? Hand, and he
yeah,
goes, "No, no, just regular rental car." I'm like, "Really? Okay." So we get down there, and after the restaurant, the bookstore was like 2 or 3 blocks away, and he said, "Well, come, you can ride with me over there." We're like, "Well, okay." So my wife and I go over there, and he has the car, and it's equipped with like this. There's a seat that he hoists himself up to, so he can sit up at the normal height, and then he has these. They look like big metal rods, hand controls, where he can do a brake and the accelerator, with this contraption on a regular car. And so I'm like,
wow,
wow, and so he manages, I mean, it's just like, he's adopted. He doesn't want people to feel sorry for him. It's just, this is just the way it is.
yeah,
So anyway, it's just, see, even though he said I'm not an inspiration, he sort of is an inspiration. He
yeah,
was to me. It makes you appreciate, how much you have that other people don't have. And so if there's a moment for me, it might be that you think, oh, I got this problem, that problem. And then you look at some what other people are dealing with and say, well, yeah, maybe I don't have that much.
Yeah. Wow. Um, from the standpoint of the book, The Boy with Wings, who really has wings, and how the story develops, and the ignorance and the superstition, and all those things that people go, well, yeah, that's back in the 30s, and traveling shows like that were a big thing. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, we went to a state fair, and the sideshow was the bearded lady,
Yeah.
kind
Mhm.
of deal, and that was just that's back in the 60s and early 70s. How do you see the translation of those kinds of mindsets in how people react to or interact with people that are different? What's kind of the modern day, the 21st century equivalent that you see, and you wish you could not wish, that you want to make a difference in and an impact in, just like in the novels of the story, the real issue isn't the freak show. It's you know the whole thing of accepting and getting past people's differences. And that's a really long ass question. I don't know. That was a lawyer thing, I guess. I couldn't shorten it up.
No, well, I will, I'll give you one example, and I don't try not to make, and this isn't meant as a political something, but it was just a real thing that, so there was a person in our church who was a trans person, male to female.
Hmm.
And, who I didn't know well or really, then she's kind of looks strange, 6 foot something with big old tennis shoes and this sort of thing. But she says to me one day, I guess I was sitting next to her in church, and she said, yeah, she goes, my morning started yesterday. I'm waiting at the bus stop, and somebody pulls up and says, I wish you were dead.
Mm.
And she goes, that's just how my day started. And, and I think about, of all the, people on all sides of all that stuff, just how hard somebody like that, how hard their life has to be. First, to go to that level, to want to change your whole, sexuality. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got to be at some kind of place that it's hard for me to even almost imagine. And then just how, you're talking about being ostracized, I mean, or somebody like that who's 15, 16. I mean, it's how just absolutely difficult their life is. And so, just, I don't know, just some compassion for people that, hey, they're different. Not everybody's the same. Not everybody's going to be exactly like me. It would be a boring world if everybody thought exactly like I did, but coming from sort of a, conservative, Southern background, that's a little bit of an eye opener.
Yeah. No, I get it. If my wife and I were to renew our vows, for and maybe like our 50th wedding anniversary or something. But if we were to renew our vows, the guy that was best man in our wedding would now be the maid of honor. Literally, I mean
Yeah.
the full medical transition, and 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 it's like I struggle with understanding the why behind all that, and I'm not talking politics or even religion. Um, uh, Beside all that, just the fundamental trying to grasp the reason why. Because as human beings, that's what differentiates us from every other species. At least on Earth, is a bear doesn't ask why this garbage. Why do they don't ask questions? The instinct. And I know about bears because we got them in our on our property. Yeah, and they get into your trash. But anyway, is that get beyond? It's hard for people to get beyond that judgmental question of why, and get, if you're going to ask any question, it would be I would guess, ask how questions. How can I help you? You're struggling, and is there something I can do to help you? That compassion. I don't have to agree with your choices or anything like that. It's like Mother Teresa said, is we can't all do great things, but we can all do little things with great love. And how can we get people to grasp that concept of park your ego at the door and don't be judgmental? It doesn't. I'm not saying you have to agree or encourage somebody to make those kinds of choices in their life, because I would not encourage you to do that. But how can I love you? How, in a little way.
Well, no question. I'm with you 100% on that. And I try and make, the best books to me are those that, in addition to entertaining you, make you think.
Hmm.
And so I've tried to do that on each of my novels. And the first novel that I wrote, the one I had no idea what I was doing, was was about a black woman who claimed to be Christ returned, and this reporter that followed her around and tried to see if she was or wasn't. And so, and I, had caused to look back at the novel a few years ago, and some of it's like I was thinking, well, man, this is pretty good, and then some of them going like, so it was an early effort, but I think the concept is still a fascinating one, because if you're a Christian, I mean, Christ wasn't exactly what people thought the first time around. So
Yeah.
this, why would you think the second is, some kind of picture like you see on the, wall of the church? And I could see, this whole scenario of some people thinking, absolutely, this is it, and a whole bunch of others going, no way. And so anyway, it's just sort of I've tried in each of these books to sort of, hey, in addition to entertaining you, doesn't that make you think a little bit,
Hmm.
and readers can judge if I've been successful or not with that.
Yeah. No, and I would liken it to that you can make two choices in life, and regardless of Christianity. I mean, an atheist can be compassionate and
Yeah.
have empathy and kindness and all those things, which I get. I wish they would, come to God and come to know Christ in their life, because it would be way much better, and especially eternity wise. But is there's like two types of experiences that, quite frankly, I never want to have, and both come out of the Scripture. I never want to have a Saul experience. I
Yeah.
don't want to have pissed off God so much that Christ comes and knocks me off a horse or whatever to get my attention and blinds me and going, "Why are you doing this to me?" But the lesson I take from Saul, who becomes Paul, is that no matter how evil or wicked somebody may be in your judgment, and killing or encouraging the Christians to be stoned to death back in Saul's time, was that's pretty brutal. But
Well, well,
that, but you can have that conversion experience. You can change, and that's the hope side. And then the other side is, I never want to have a Judas moment where I think I know better than God and pull a betrayal stunt like that, and then realize how wrong I was and go off and hang myself. Yeah, I want to be kind of between those two rails in a way, but but live life learning how to be a better person, as opposed to like one of the worst things. And I despise this when people go, it is what it is. And I'm like, no, it's not what it is, and you're giving up if that's the mindset. And
what I love about Paul, Saul to Paul, is, don't you know people like this? This is why it catches you. I mean, people, sort of obsessive people that, I have several friends that are just this, and they go in this direction, and suddenly something changes. They're going in this direction. going hard whichever way, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like a reformed smoker. Well, there's no more anymore, yeah. And so, and Peter, I mean, that's Christ. No, I don't know him.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not, they're so human. That's what what's what resonates with for people for thousands of years.
Yeah. And that sense of spirituality of one realizing there really is grace in this world, and I actually use grace as an acronym. God's rewards at Christ's expense. I don't deserve any thing. People will go, well, or somebody wins something, and they get whatever, an award or whatever, and people go, oh, well, yeah, they really deserve that. And or you talk to cops. I mean, my 30 plus years in law enforcement, and you honor a cop at an awards ceremony. You give them the Medal of Valor, and their immediate, genuine, humble response is, "Well, no, I was just doing my job."
Right.
And but in this whole world of where talking like the freak shows and the genocides and all the chaos and evil we see, we can throw our hands up and give up, or we can the man in the arena, speech that the president gave in France, and be the man in the arena or be the spectator. You got to make a choice, and I think it's fun to see folks with your gifts and talents to make that choice in writing and doing getting people to think. So that begs my next question. That was a long introduction speech to my next question. And so the next question is, what's next on the horizon for you? You got another book in the works, or what are you doing these days?
Well, yeah. So I have another book that's finished that my agent is shopping now, but I'm sort of superstitious about talking about it because as soon
Okay.
as I do, people will say, well, what happened to the Revolutionary War book? And I'm like, I could never get it published. So I'm hopeful that's that I'll hear something this fall, and then I'm working on one after that. And so
Yeah.
I like that his, for whatever reason, I've sort of discovered. I mean, each of my books have had a historical part to it, and I like it. I like the research. I like learning about things.
Yeah.
I like learning more about the Depression in the U.S. Things I never thought about or didn't know, and so that's on the horizon. I wanted to talk briefly about the festival, though, about Word of South, because
Yeah. Yeah.
that's definitely in the future because it's going on right now. So this is so this is I'll give you the short version of how all this came to pass. So when the Gendarme was published, I got invited to speak at these literary festivals around the country. And I'd never been to one. And they were, I was like, man, this is really cool.
Yeah.
There's all these people here. They're way into books. It's free, And I said, we should do something like this in Tallahassee. But I was on the commission then, and I said, I need to get off the commission because this is too much work to try and pull all this together. And so when I didn't run again, I decided, well, I would, we're going to give it a go here. And so we started the festival in 2015. We'd accumulated money for 2 years. We had this awesome lineup, and it rained all weekend long. And and most of these events were in tents outside, so stuff got
Yeah.
canceled. People got pulled off the stage, and it was a mess. But we sort of decided, well, we sort of got something going here because when we first started, I said, well, rather than be the Tallahassee version of the South Carolina Literary Festival, why don't we try and do something different? And so we talked about where you could combine books and politics, books and the environment, but
Huh.
we sort of decided, well, books and music might be kind of the easiest thing to do. So we did, and we've kept it going for 13 years. And there's nothing, Pat, nothing exactly like this in the country. And so you gotta come over and check this out.
Yeah.
It's every April, and it moves around some during the month of April, depending on when Easter is. So next year it'll be April the 9th to the 11th. And the format is we have a ticketed show in the amphitheater Friday night. This past year was Ben Folds. I mean, I'm sorry, it was Earth, Wind, and Fire. We've had Ben Folds and Jason Isbell and the Avett Brothers and all those big groups,
Yeah.
and then it's 50 something. It's free the rest of the weekend. 50 something different acts, 8 different stages, and a bunch of authors and musicians appearing together. And we found it's we do a number of those every year, and it's sort of amazing what we had one a couple of years ago where we had the historian John Meacham, and I asked him, said, "Hey, would you appear with this, with a musician?" He said, "Okay." I said, "It'd be a little different gig than what you normally do." He goes, "Yeah, I'd do it." And so there's this woman. She's an African American guitar phenom, and her name is Yasmin Williams. And so we put them together. They had one Zoom call for like 10 minutes beforehand, and then they talked again 10 minutes before they went on stage, and just blew it away. And,
Wow.
and so I went up to him afterwards and said, "I thought that would work." So that's so it's stuff like that you just really can't see anywhere else. I'm proud of what we've done. When we first started this, I thought, well, I'll be involved in this like 5 years, and then I'm out of here doing other things. But I'm still there because I want to keep the vision of what we're doing, and I think it's just super unique and fun thing. It's a lot of work, but we're happy to still be headed towards year 13 here.
Wow. Well, I wrote the date down. I'm going to check my calendar after we jump off. And with any luck, I might actually be in Florida teaching a class because I usually am down there in the late winter, early spring. And then again, I told you when I was in Davie last week, it's like, man, why do they book me for training stuff in the middle of July in Florida when
So
I'm
they can get
from?
the cheap hotel rooms. That's what all the conferences are down here.
And well, I live at 7,000 feet, and to go to sea level, or or worse, go to New Orleans, be below sea level. It's like trying to breathe underwater, and I can't. I'm like, please give me the mountains. I need the thin air, not the weighty 95% humidity. Wow. So book wise, you shared that, and I don't want you to give away anything, but I love your concept of historical fiction, and I've learned more from historical fiction books than I'd learned in history class, in high school. One of my favorite authors, because I was born in Ireland, so I'm huge on Irish history, whether it's mythical Irish history or history. A lady named Morgan Llewellyn wrote incredible historical fiction books, and then and I can't remember the name of the author, but Trafalgar was one of a series of books. There's one, Sharp was the name of the soldier, but the Napoleonic Wars,
Right.
and all that history was great. And then Morgan Llewellyn wrote a book called 1916, and the only thing fiction in it was a guy named Ned O'Halloran, who was a journalist and embedded with Michael Collins and whatnot. That person was fiction. Everything else about the book was historically accurate about leading up to Bloody Sunday in 1916 and whatnot. And they're so fascinating to read because you're learning history. You're not just reading a story.
Right.
So kudos to you for having that vision and mission to do historical fiction. So if you got a couple more in the hopper, I'm looking forward to reading those. I always ask this. Well, not always. Usually, I ask this question because I get so excited about asking a bunch of questions, and then I chase rabbits down holes. What have I not asked you that you're like, oh, man, I wish Pat would ask me something about a question or whatever, and like the festival, I didn't even think of going there. So is there anything else? I mean, what am I missing that you'd like? Man, I really want the audience to hear.
Well, I guess that, so one thing we haven't talked about, we could, mention briefly is, so I've been with the same law firm for 40 years. And which in this day and age is an anomaly.
Yeah.
And I attribute it to some extent, the same with whatever success I've had in writing, kind of to perseverance. I mean, the law firm, I remember I was the fourth lawyer with the firm. It's like 25 or something now. And eventually I became the president. And all of that was sort of, in the early days, I always gave it a 50-50 where the law firm made it another year because there were strong personalities involved, people grabbing money and,
Yeah.
but anyway, I just, I became the president because I became sort of the logical choice to do it at the end. And it's because I was there and and I knew the firm, knew the people. And so I became sort of like people said, well, what is it like being the president? I said, well, it's ego management. You're the best lawyer that ever lived. And so, but so in the writing, sort of the same. I had periods after my first book was published. I remember. So the title of that book is The Return, and it was published by a small sort of mom and pop regional publisher in Florida. And they came up and had dinner with me in Tallahassee. And I remember the saying, "Oh, well, now that you've been published, it'll be easy for you to get an agent." Well, not so. And so I had, that was published in the year 2000. The Gendarme wasn't published until 2010. And I went years and years with, the way you got an agent, and it's still sort of the way this is you send out what are called query letters. And they're sort of one pagers about here's what I've done. Here's,
Mm-hmm.
and would you be interested in looking at, maybe here's a sample chapter if they want it. And even though you gear yourself up for rejection, after about 25, you start to go, well, maybe this just isn't that good.
Yeah.
So with my first agent that I got for the Gendarme, I was on about query number 80 by the time I got him.
Wow.
And then we have ended up parting ways later. And same thing. I went back through that whole process again, about number 80 again, and I got my current agent. And so it's just sort of not giving up, Pat. I mean, look at your life. I mean, there's certainly been times where you could have said, this is just too overwhelming. I'm just, and so I've just kept swinging.
Yeah. Well, perseverance and being able to accept rejection without making it personal. I think that's one of the hardest things we see in today's world, in every arena, but it's so accentuated in the political arena and in the faith arena is that people don't have conversations; they have arguments, and and it's all about one of my favorite books, and I've read it and reread it. Ryan Holiday's "Ego is the Enemy," and keeping your ego. Yes, we have an ego for a reason, but when it gets to that point where it makes adversity its primary purpose, then I tease like one of the reasons we've been married for 46 years is I learned very early on that you never get the last word in an argument because when you think it's over and you say something, you say one more thing, you just got to get that last word in, you've just started a new argument. and so that's one of my reminders is, I even wrote an article about it once, that yes, you've been given a voice, but you've not been given the last word, and you need to know when to shut up.
I was telling somebody this the other night. So we had premarital counseling before we got married. I've been married 35 years, and so I remember we go in with a minister, and he says, "Well, now there's going to be points in your marriage when you're going to get in an argument, and let me just tell you, that you can be right or you can be married." Well, that's good. I've tried to remember that. But yeah, sort of along the same way. People, so many times people could just shut up.
Yeah,
Don't say anything else.
yeah, yeah. I just read an article yesterday that somebody posted on Substack, and it was really interesting. It was about listening, and in that if you listen simply with the intent to respond, then you're never going to learn what you have in common with other people because you've set your mind on being an adversary, and that you we need to be. He calls it active listeners, and there's a great book, "Never Split the Difference," by Chris Voss, who was a hostage negotiator, and it was really interesting for me. And I just read this within the last year. So here I am, 68 years old, learning that, you know what, you'll accomplish a lot more if you quit talking as much and become a better listener, not with the intent to respond to whatever they're saying, but to learn what that person needs. And he was talking about it from in a hostage negotiation situation, that all of us want the same four things in life: safety, security, prosperity, and control. And you cannot learn what somebody wants in those arenas if you're always arguing with them and trying to win them over, or win the debate, or win this or win that. And I think that's a very difficult lesson to learn in today's society, and it kind of tags in with your with the boy with wings, and the whole superstition and ignorance and religion, and even being in the South in the 30s kind of deal. That yes, it's difficult, but yes, you can make your world, or your little piece of the world, a better place if you lose your ego, or set it aside at least.
Absolutely.
And so, Mark, good luck with being up there in Michigan. Again, I'm not going to hold it against you because you're in the UP, so that's better than being further south. Well, you're a University of Florida guy. Are you a Gator?
I'm a Gator.
Yeah.
Gator.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's been a long dry spell, but give us a couple of years. I think we'll be back.
I don't know, all the SEC and Big Ten, all the drama I think I just saw yesterday USC and Notre Dame resolved their differences so they can continue their 10-year tradition of, having playing one another. Yeah, there was some big thing because USC's in the Big Ten now, and Notre Dame is still not in a. I don't think. But yeah, all the stuff that's going on, that the Big Ten wants to do their thing, and the SEC, and everybody's all pissed off at everybody, and so
it's sort of money's driving the whole thing. It is sort of, college football has always been my main interest, and so, but it's waned some because I'm just kind of like, this is becoming like the junior NFL. So yeah, it's sort of sad in a way.
Yeah, that NIL, the name, image, and likeness, and all that crap has ruined the purity of collegiate sports, in my humble opinion.
I agree.
And it's just not fun to watch anymore. There's no loyalty or it's all about the money. These guys who was the guy that was like a sixth-year senior?
Well, I know. There seems like there's several of those on every team now. So,
24 years old and still playing college football.
Yeah, exactly.
But that could be a whole different conversation. Well, Mark, it's been a blast having you on. Tell people what's the best way to reach out to you, whether it's the word of South or your books or whatever. How do they get a hold of you?
Well, the easiest way is just to go on my website, which is markmustian.com. It's just my name.com. And there's information about the festival there. You can go to that website. That's wordofsouthfestival.com. And my books are, you can purchase them through independent bookstores. You can get them off Amazon. So there's several ways to access those as well. And I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook. Again, it's Mark Mustian, author there. And I don't do much else. I'm on Blue Sky, but I don't do much on that. So anyway, but yeah, feel free to contact me, and I'll respond.
Awesome, man. It's so great to have you on the show, and I'm looking forward to getting all your books. And because my wife yells at me when I retired in Ohio, and we were going to move here to Colorado. I probably had, I'm not exaggerating, probably 1,000 pounds of books. And she's like, "We're not moving all those. They charge by the pound, the moving company." So I think I made 5 truckload, full bed truck filled with boxes of books 5 times to Goodwill to donate books to them. And right now I have 4. I'm reading 4 different books at the same time, and she's always like, "You're not going to keep those. You're not going. We don't have a library. Behind me, we have. I'm actually in our wine cellar. And I'm like, man, I don't drink a lot of wine, but this would make a great book room.
Right. We could throw a few books in here.
Yeah. And then I'd be hiring a divorce attorney because she would be kicking me out of the house. So, Mark, it's great to have you. We're so glad we were able to make this happen and have a great conversation. To our audience, we thank you for being loyal listeners. Because of you, we are now downloaded in 75 countries and Hong Kong. So keep listening, keep downloading, liking, commenting, sharing our episodes with someone that you know needs to hear today's message. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, all those things, which I have no idea how to operate them all, but at Pat Welsh JD, and on LinkedIn, subscribe to our Warrior Servant newsletter. It's for free. That's also Pat Welsh JD on LinkedIn. And till then, I'm going to end this show like I do every show. Always, always, always strive to do the right thing at the right time, the right way and for the right reasons, because that's what warriors, servants, and leaders do every day, every time. Until next week, love you all, and remember, do the right thing, right time, right way, and for the right reasons. See you next week.